Las Vegas, Nevada. A Friday evening in September 2008. The kind of night where the city hums with its usual electricity, where the strip pulses with light and noise and the endless parade of people looking for something. But tonight Mike Tyson isn't on the strip. He's away from the spectacle, away from the cameras, away from everything that comes with being one of the most recognizable faces on the planet. He's somewhere quiet, somewhere normal, somewhere he can breathe. Mike Tyson is 42 years old, 3 years removed from his final professional fight against Kevin McBride. His professional record closed at 50 wins, 6 losses, 44 knockouts. Numbers that tell part of the story but not the whole story. The whole story includes prison, addiction, bankruptcy, personal tragedy, and the slow, grueling process of rebuilding a life from ashes. He's been sober for almost a year, working on a one-man show, reconnecting with his children, finding purpose outside the ring for the first time since he was a teenager in Brownsville, Brooklyn, when Cus D'Amato found him and changed everything. Tonight he's at a mid-range steakhouse on a side street 3 blocks from the Strip. Not a tourist trap, not a celebrity hotspot, just a good restaurant. Quiet, decent food. The kind of place where a man can sit alone with his meal and his thoughts without anyone expecting anything from him. The interior is warm, amber lighting that softens everything. Dark wood tables, white tablecloths. Jazz plays through speakers mounted in the corners, low enough to fill the silence without demanding attention. A saxophone drifts through something smooth and unhurried, matching the pace of the evening perfectly. Tyson is at a corner table, set slightly apart from the main dining area by a low partition. He's wearing dark jeans, a black button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. No hood tonight because he's in a good mood. Feels relaxed in a way that doesn't happen often enough. His phone is off. Nobody knows he's here except the hostess who seated him and the waiter who took his order. For the next hour, he's just a man eating dinner. Nothing more. The restaurant is maybe 60% full. Friday evening crowd spread across 30 tables. Couples on dates. Groups of friends celebrating something. A few solo diners scattered around the room. Normal Friday night. Normal crowd. Tyson is halfway through his meal. A ribeye steak, cooked medium rare. A glass of sparkling water beside his plate. He's eating methodically, not rushing, cutting each piece with careful precision, chewing slowly, tasting it. This is what sobriety gave him back. The ability to be present. The ability to actually experience moments instead of drowning them. At a table about 20 feet away, a group of 4 men occupy a larger table. They've been there for a while, long enough to have emptied 2 bottles of wine and be most of the way through a third. They're loud, not obnoxiously loud, but loud enough that their conversation carries. Loud enough that fragments reach Tyson's ears whether he wants them to or not. Businessmen, all of them, suits loosened and sleeves rolled up the way men get when they've been drinking and celebrating something that happened at the office. The loudest of the 4 has been glancing at Tyson's table for the last 20 minutes. He's tall, 6'2", lean and fit in the way that comes from regular tennis or golf. Late 40s, salt and pepper hair, an expensive watch on his wrist that catches the light every time he moves his hand. His name is Richard. He owns a distribution company that does well enough to afford this restaurant, this watch, this lifestyle. He's successful by every conventional measure, respected in his industry. The kind of man who walks into rooms expecting to be acknowledged. Richard has had enough wine that the careful judgment he relies on during business hours has been replaced by something raw, something that operates on instinct and ego. And his ego wants a story tonight. Something impressive, something that separates him from the other men at his table. He spotted Mike Tyson, and Mike Tyson is a story. His friends at the table have noticed where his eyes keep going. One of them, the smartest of the 4, a quieter man named James, leans over and says in a low voice, "Richard, whatever you're thinking, don't." Richard waves him off without looking at him, his attention fixed on Tyson's table. Richard stands up, takes his wine glass, and walks toward Tyson's table with the easy, unhurried stride of someone who has never been told no in a professional setting. He reaches the table, stops, looks down at Tyson. "Mike Tyson," he says. "Well, I'll be damned. In the flesh." Tyson looks up from his plate. His expression is neutral, not hostile, not friendly, just present. He says, "How you doing?" Not a question. A polite acknowledgement that functions as a boundary, a gentle signal that this conversation doesn't need to go any further. Richard doesn't read the signal. He pulls out the empty chair across from Tyson and sits down, sets his wine glass on the table, and settles into the seat like he's joining an old friend. The uninvited nature of this move would be obvious to anyone watching, and several people in the restaurant are watching. "I've wanted to meet you for years," Richard says, leaning forward with the practiced ease of a man who negotiates for a living. "Watched you fight growing up, Saturday nights with my father. You were something else back then." Tyson nods once, says nothing, picks up his fork again. A subtle signal that he'd like to continue eating. Richard doesn't take the hint. "I've always thought your career was fascinating from a business perspective." Richard continues. "The way you built your brand, the intimidation factor, the persona, all of it. And especially after the Holyfield incident. You turned something that should have destroyed your career into more publicity. That's genius-level marketing." He takes a sip of his wine, savoring it, savoring the conversation, savoring the fact that Mike Tyson is sitting across from him listening. He shifts his tone, becoming more direct, more pointed. "But here's the thing I've always wondered, and I'm asking this with genuine respect, as one successful man to another." He pauses. The pause is deliberate, the kind of dramatic beat that men like Richard insert into conversations to elevate the moment. "You're nothing without the gloves, are you?" He says it casually, like he's stating a fact, like he's offering an insight that no one has been brave enough to share before. "Everything you built, the fear, the legend, the mystique, it all came from the ring. The gloves, the rules, the structure. You step into that box with gloves on and a referee watching and you're terrifying. Everyone knows that. But step outside that box, take off the gloves, no ring, no referee, no rules, then you're just a guy. A regular guy. Big, sure. Intimidating, sure. But just a guy. The gloves are what made you dangerous. Without them, you're nothing special." He finishes with a slight smile, pleased with himself, satisfied that he said something honest and provocative. He expects surprise and discomfort from Tyson, the reaction of someone whose image has been challenged by someone perceptive enough to see past it. The restaurant has gone noticeably quieter around their table. People within earshot have picked up on the shift in energy. Conversations have dimmed. Forks have paused. Richard's three friends have stopped talking completely. James has his hand over his face. Tyson puts his fork down. Slowly, deliberately, places it precisely on the right side of his plate, parallel to the edge of the table. A small, controlled movement that communicates more than any words could. He looks at Richard and says nothing, just looks. The silence begins. 5 seconds pass. Richard's smile holds, but it's becoming less confident, more something he's maintaining through effort. 6 seconds. 7. 8. The silence stretches, becomes uncomfortable, becomes something physical, a weight that settles over the table like fog. 10 seconds. Tyson hasn't blinked. His eyes are fixed on Richard's face with an intensity that has nothing to do with anger and everything to do with assessment. The same eyes that stared down Evander Holyfield across a ring. The same eyes that looked at Buster Douglas before the fight that changed everything. The same eyes that watched the world from behind prison walls for 3 years. Those eyes are looking at Richard now. 15 seconds. The jazz saxophone plays on, oblivious. Richard shifts in his chair. The movement is small, but involuntary, a physical response to the growing discomfort, to those eyes that haven't moved and haven't blinked. 20 seconds. Richard opens his mouth to fill the silence. I'm just being honest. It's an observation. I'm not trying to disrespect you or anything. I just think the truth should be acknowledged." Tyson doesn't respond, doesn't acknowledge it at all, just continues looking at Richard. And in that continued silence, Richard finally understands what Tyson hasn't said. Understands it as clearly as if it had been spoken aloud. You have made a mistake. You are sitting across from someone who has destroyed men far more dangerous than you. You are telling him he is nothing. And he is choosing right now not to respond the way he has responded to similar disrespect throughout his entire life. He is choosing patience, and that choice is more frightening than any action could be. Tyson speaks. His voice is quiet, barely above a whisper, the high-pitched voice that sounds wrong coming from someone who has caused so much destruction. He says, "Stand up." Richard blinks. "What?" Tyson says again, same quiet tone, same flat delivery. "Stand up. I want to show you something." Something in Tyson's voice has penetrated layers of alcohol and ego and reached something deeper, something primitive that understands danger on a level that conscious thought can't override. But Richard has spent 40 years building a persona based on confidence, on never backing down. He's not going to crack that persona now, in front of strangers, in front of his friends watching from 20 feet away, with expressions of pure dread. He stands up, slowly, puts his hands in his pockets to hide the trembling, tries to arrange his face into something that looks casual, unworried. Tyson stands too, and here is where Richard sees something he didn't see when Tyson was seated. The weight redistributes, the posture shifts. Something transforms from relaxed civilian to something else entirely, something that doesn't have a comfortable word in the vocabulary of people who live safe lives. Compact, dense, coiled. Every pound of muscle suddenly visible in the way Tyson holds himself, in the slight bend of his knees, in the way his shoulders settle, in the way his hands hang at his sides, open but ready. Always ready. Because in 42 years of life, many of them violent, readiness became as automatic as breathing. Richard is 6'2". Tyson is 5'10". Richard has 30 pounds on him. But standing here, face to face, 3 feet apart in a quiet restaurant on a Friday night, none of those numbers matter. The hierarchy between them has nothing to do with size. Tyson says, still quietly, "You said I'm nothing without gloves. You think the gloves are what made me dangerous." He pauses, patient, the patience of someone who has all the time in the world. "I started fighting when I was 9 years old. 9, on the streets of Brownsville, Brooklyn. No gloves, no ring, no referee, no rules. Just me and whoever decided I was going to get hurt that day. And I had to figure out by myself how to survive it. Every single day, for years, before Cus D'Amato found me, before any of the training, before any of the championships, there was a kid in Brownsville learning how to fight with bare hands because his life depended on it." Richard's hands have come out of his pockets. They're visibly trembling. The alcohol hasn't touched his body's response to genuine threat. His body knows what his mind is still trying to process. Tyson continues, his voice never rising above a conversational level. "The gloves don't make me dangerous. The gloves protect the other man from what I actually am. The gloves are the restraint. Take them off, and I don't become less dangerous. I become more. Everything you've seen on television, that was me holding back, controlled, measured, working within rules designed to keep men alive." He steps forward, 1 step, closes the distance from 3 feet to 2, not aggressive, just closer. Close enough that Richard can feel the body heat, can see every scar, every line on Tyson's face left by decades of violence received and delivered. Close enough that the space between them feels like something you can't escape. "You came over to my table to get a story," Tyson says. "Something to tell people. Something that makes you look like the kind of man who isn't intimidated by legends." A pause. "Here's your story. You told Mike Tyson he was nothing without gloves. And Mike Tyson didn't hit you. He explained to you why he could have hit you and chose not to. That's your story. Take it back to your table and think about what it means." The silence that follows is different from before. The earlier silence was Tyson deciding. This silence is Richard absorbing, processing, feeling the full weight of what just happened. He stands there for a long moment, his mouth slightly open, his confidence gone completely, replaced by shame and fear and the beginning of genuine understanding. Richard says quietly, the first quiet thing he's said all night, "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said that." Tyson nods once, says, "Go sit down and finish your dinner." Richard turns, walks back to his table, doesn't look back. His friends don't say anything as he sits down. James pours him more wine without being asked. Richard drinks it slowly, staring at the tablecloth, feeling the tremor still in his hands, feeling the hollow sensation in his chest that comes from having your understanding of the world fundamentally altered in 3 minutes. Tyson returns to his corner table, sits down, picks up his fork, resumes eating his steak with the same precise movements he was using before Richard ever walked over. His breathing hasn't changed. For Tyson, this was nothing. A minor interruption, a lesson delivered because it needed delivering. Weeks later, Richard tells the story at a dinner gathering. He tells it honestly, which surprises the people who know him, because Richard is not a man who admits to losing exchanges. But this one he tells accurately, completely, without embellishment. The lesson is too important to distort. He tells them about the silence, about how Tyson didn't yell or threaten or posture, just sat there and looked at him. And somehow that silence was more terrifying than any threat Richard had ever received in 30 years of business. He tells them about the gloves, about how he thought that was a clever observation, and how Tyson took it apart in 3 minutes, showing him that everything he thought he understood about toughness was built on assumptions that men like Tyson destroyed decades ago. He tells them that Tyson could have hurt him and didn't, that the restraint was more impressive than any violence he ever witnessed on television, that the choice not to hit him revealed more about who Mike Tyson actually is than 33 years of professional fighting ever could. Someone asks Richard what he learned. He thinks for a long time before answering. He says, "I learned that real strength has nothing to do with what you can do. It's about what you choose not to do. Mike Tyson could destroy most people with his bare hands. He's proven that his entire life. But watching him choose to teach me instead of hurt me, I understood something for the first time. The most powerful thing a dangerous man can do is show mercy. And Mike Tyson showed me mercy that night, not because he had to, not because I deserved it, because he chose to. That one choice taught me more about strength than anything I've learned in 40 years of living." He pauses, finishes his drink, and says one final thing. "I called him nothing without gloves, and without throwing a single punch, he showed me that he's everything. The gloves were never the point. They never were. I just didn't understand that until a man who's been fighting since he was 9 years old stood up in a quiet restaurant and showed me exactly what I didn't know, and what I didn't know turned out to be everything." Back in Las Vegas, Mike Tyson finished his dinner that night, paid his bill in cash, left a generous tip, walked out into the September evening, put his hood up, and disappeared into the city like he'd never been there at all. No story to tell, no lesson learned on his end, just another Friday night, another man who needed to understand something, another few minutes of his time spent teaching what violence taught him decades ago, that the gloves were never the weapon. The man wearing them always was, always had been, always would be, with or without them.